So I like keeping my measures together in one table. So we're going to have a table that holds all our measures together. So I'm going to call the table measures. Always put an underscore. I like putting an underscore first. You may name yours something else, maybe key measures, key metrics. And for a start, I'm just going to adjust the page size. Let me see custom. For the height, I'm going to do 1,200 or 1,500. Then for the width, I'm just going to do 2,500. That's 2,500. Let me do 1,500 here. Yeah. Then I'm also going to align this to the middle. Okay, that's set already. Then I'm just going to add a little background. Something, let me see, let me go to blue, then remove transparency. I can now go back to this color and go to more colors. Then I can choose something grayish. Okay, so this is not a custom report design, so I'm not going to be adding fancy colors, doing a lot of design stuff. So I'll just leave this as this for now. Close this, and so this is what it looks like. If you, yeah, this is what this looks like. So what we can do next now is to start creating our measures. So for the first measures, I just want to count the distinct number of customers, right? So we can call it active customers. So I'll call this active customers. So to count the active customers, or just a distinct count, fact sales, customer ID. So this will give me a distinct count of all customers. So if we should just drop this as a card visual, just drop this. So we have this as, let me see, card. Now you get to see the total number of customers that were active within that period. So that's for this. So I would just like to save this workbook so that nothing goes wrong, right? So I'm going to save this now. So I'm done saving the file. So let's continue. So we see the total number of customers is 5,878, but we also want to know the number of new customers, right? So we can delete this column. It's no longer relevant. So what we need to do next is just calculate the total number of new customers, new measure. So I'm going to call it new customers. So for these new customers, we don't need to do anything serious. And I also like building dependencies between my measures so that if something goes wrong, I know I have to find just one place and correct it. So we want to calculate, referencing the measures we used earlier, but this time around, we want to filter it where the fact sales month since first transaction is equal to 0. So if we didn't perform the calculation earlier, we didn't add that column, we may have the need to start writing that function here and in other places multiple times. So I try to avoid it completely. But if I'm convincing the future that that one is better, I may try it. But presently, I think this is easy to understand. It's also easier to. So if we should drop the measure that calculates the number of new customers for us, you realize that the value is also going to be the same as the number of active customers. So you don't panic, right? That's expected. So just add comma. So we're not going to be dropping new customers as a measure like right down here, right? We want to add this maybe to like a table or something. So for example, let's add this to a table. Let's click on Let me use a matrix chart for example and expand this a bit. So what I would like to do is to add the start of month, and I want to see this as date, start of month, date. So this is because I increased the size, so this is going to be small for you. So let me increase the font size. I think row headers. Let me do 25. It's 25 too much. Okay. Yeah. Let me do 20. Yeah, so 20 seems fine. So here I can now add the total number of active customers. That's for values. I'll go to values and also increase the font size to 20. So you get to see the total number of active customers for each month. And we can just align the row headers to the right. Yep. So I think this is a lot easier to read. So we have all the values that we want to see here. Then we can also now add new customers. If you add new customers, you see for December, it's expected that the number of active customers is the same thing as new customers, right? Since that's when our data starts from. And after that, now you get to see the number of active customers and you get to see the number of customers that are actually new within that period, right? So if you want, you can just, let's say we duplicate this. Let's say we duplicate this and take out active customers. We have those new customers here. You can just add this as a trend line for example. So if you add this as a trend line, then you get to see the number of customers that are new. You want to see if you're acquiring more new customers. You want to see if what has happened. You may want to speak to your marketing team to see why you're not acquiring new customers. And if you have a campaign going on, you want to know why the campaign is not effective. The number of new customers is still reducing. You get that? So that's just this, but the focus is not on doing this analysis. But it's really good to have something like this. Really, you have active customers, new customers. Then now you have the trend for new customers. You can choose to take this a step forward by maybe making a forecast, right? You can add a trend line. You can go and do a forecast to see if your new customers is going to be increasing or is it going to be reducing. You can choose to add add a percentile. You would want the percentile to be at, let's see, where are you? The percentile to be at maybe 50%. Then you get to see where 50% for your new customers. What's the average? You get above, is it below? Oh no, we are going down, all that. But we're not doing that right now. So let me just call this page new customers. New customers. So I'm going to take out this measure and this one right here. And now we have our new customers. And since we're not adding many things on this page, you can always resize your page if you want to, right? You can always resize your page. So I'm going to duplicate. Okay, let me resize this page. I'd hope to add many things, but now that I think about it, I just want to add a few things on each page so that you can follow along easily. So I'm going to change this to this and reduce the size of the visual. Because when we're putting everything together on the final page, we can choose to increase the size of that page. Yep, this is our new customers, and you get to see 200. But this line shows you the average, the middle, where you have your new customers coming. So you know where it's more than the middle or greater than the middle. If you don't need the line, you can always just take it out. Okay, so up next, now that we have been able to calculate the number of new customers, instead of naming this as start of month, we can name this as month, year. So we know that we are looking at the data for each month across all the years that we have in our data. So I'm going to duplicate this page. So I've duplicated this page, but this time around, I don't want to see just the new customers, right? I want to see the number of customers that were retained over time for this. And remember that this new customers now forms our cohort size. Customers that belong for each month, the new customers for each month references our cohort size. And for you to know that this is working fine, you can just go to, remember we're using a matrix chart, so you can just go to months since first transaction and add it as columns. If you add this as column, you see it's going to spread out. So you see that the value for each month, you see that the value is repeated multiple times. It's important. If you do this and the values are not repeated, something is wrong, because you want to be able to know that, okay, this is the total number of customers that belong to this cohort. So regardless of when we look back, we want to know that, yes, this is the number of customers that belong here. Now, what we need to calculate next is that while this is the cohort size, how many of these customers were actually retained? That's the next calculation that we are going to do. So let me show you, and let's do it. So one way to do that is create measure. There may be multiple ways to do this, but for me personally, this is a lot easier to understand, remember, and it works fine, right? So what should I call it? I'll call it cohort performance. I'll call it cohort performance. Cohort performance. I'll just spell performance. Yeah, this is it. Cohort performance. So we want to to do that, we're going to be creating two variables. The first variable we are going to create is called minimum date. So the minimum date is going to be looking at the minimum date in the start of month. That's the date, right? Yeah. So this, I think sometimes this can also be capital. Yeah, minimum. And then we also want to look at the maximum date. I'll show you why this is important in a moment. Max date. This is also going to look at the max date. Max date, start of month. And now we have the minimum date from the start of month and the maximum date from the start of month. Let's create our measure. So we want to return, calculate. What do we want to calculate right here? Remember, active customers. Now, if we should just do this, right, it's going to, what's the word for it? It's going to be giving us a lot of issues. So what we want to do is that we want to remove all the filters coming from the start of month. You see the start of month? We want to remove all the filters that is coming from the start of month. So we do remove filters. So we do date, start of month. If we just close this and apply, so we will come back to modify this. I just want to show you what will happen if we just drop this in our visual. So I'll come back to this visual here and remove new customers. Remove new customers and add cohort performance. You see that the values are just everywhere, right? You see the same values are repeated everywhere for each column because we have removed filters for this. So we'll just go back, and what we want to do is to let this understand that, okay, we are more concerned about when these customers made their first purchase. That's the cohort they belong to. One that's to understand that, okay, these people belong to this cohort. So regardless of when they make purchases, we want that to know, okay, they belong to this cohort. So we say, we use the related. Let me add a comma. So we use the related function, related table rather. So the related table is dim customers. You should understand that. Click on OK. If you do that, you see what the result looks like. Now, this is what it looks like, which is still the same as before. You get that? So if we now go back and say, okay, let's say we comment out. I'm doing this so that you see the way each of these steps that we've applied, how it's affecting what we are going to be doing. So if I should remove the option that says remove filters, that means the filters coming from the start of month column are still there. What is the result going to look like? You see that this is what the result looks like, but this is not what a good cohort chart looks like, right? So this is more like the opposite of what we want to achieve. This is more like, okay, sorry. This is more like the opposite of what we want to achieve, because these customers that you're seeing, seven, most of these customers belong to the way this is showing, this is not showing the way we want it to show, right? So, which is why we are applying the remove filters. So as a final step, what I'm going to do is comment this step, then we're going to add one more step. So we want to make sure that the date coming from this table, we'll call it dim customers, first transaction month is greater than or equal to the minimum date. It's looking at this date, which is a minimum date, which will be the cohort month. And the dim customer first one is less than or equal to the maximum date. Max date. Yep. That's it. Then click on OK. This is going to solve our problem. So that's good. You realize now that this is working exactly the way we want it to work, right? So we just told Dax to, like, okay, these guys have to, let me take out this measure, we don't need it here. Look at these guys that belong to this cohort. We just want you to know that, okay, all the transactions they have, they may be in different months, but they should just stay on this row. They belong here. We don't want you slotting the graph and giving us the inverse of what we need, right? This is what we need, and this is what our result looks like. And just to show you something fun, if we, let me minimize, let me reduce the size of this a bit. So if we should just insert a table, okay, let me use a matrix one more time. We should insert a matrix, use the start of month, and add the new customer. Yeah, then go back. Okay, let me reduce this as well a bit. Yeah. Now, you will notice that for where the month since first transaction is equal to 0, you see that it is the same thing as the number of new customers. You get that, isn't that good? So that means that our measures are working fine. They're giving us the expected results. Okay, up next, we have been able to calculate, what should I call this? Retained customers. Let me call this number of retained customers. Number of retained, or let's call it cohort performance. Cohort, since that's what the measure is. Performance. Cohort performance. How well is this cohort performing? So we can just leave this like this. But there are instances where if you see some visuals, like if you check online and see some visuals, so you don't see 0, right? It doesn't make sense to have 0. So what you have there is the sorry, excuse me. So you don't see zeros. So what you have here is just like from one upwards. So what we can do here is to see where the month six first transaction is greater than zero. Then click on apply. And now you're going to see that the zero will be gone from this visual. And now we just have one, right? So this is what we have here is just like 1 month later. So I can just copy the formatting for this visual and paste it here first, just to be sure that the two visuals are formatted in the same way. So I can drag this visual over this visual, and now we have the month six first transaction. And to be on the safer side, we're going to take out all the totals. We don't need the totals. In case if you need it, you need to format it in a way that the totals align, right? But we don't need a total for this, or you can just leave the total for new customers just to show you the total number of customers. Then one more thing, you want to make sure that by the time, if you're publishing this as a live report to Power BI, for example, you want to make sure that when people click on this visual, it doesn't come to the front like it did here on Power BI desktop. And when you click on this, so this should always stay on top. That way people will know that we are layering the visuals over each other, except for instances where they convert the visual to focus mode, right? So what you can do here is to just click on this visual and go to just search for maintain. So you say maintain layer order is very important. If you don't want when people click on the visual, it comes to the front, it should stay in the background. You should maintain that order. Then for this visual as well, we want to turn that on where we maintain layer order. So with this, we've been able to, instead of start of month, remember, instead of the start of month, you can just rename it to cohort. Rename this to cohort and you're fine. Up next, you can choose to group the two visuals together. So this is more like one single visual. So now you understand why we had to do all we did, and this looks really good. So for each, these new customers, you can call it cohort size, but new customers make sense. So you get to see for each month the number of customers the company was able to retain over a period of time. And you can choose to format this visual, right? So click on this first visual, go to code performance, go to conditional formatting, and I like to use from grayscale to any other color that is here and click on OK. But the issue with this is that you will get to see this grayscale here. You don't want the gray color here. You don't want that, right? So to remove that, what you need to do is just go to conditional formatting, click on background color again. But this time around, how should we format empty values? So don't leave it as zeros. Empty values, we don't want to format empty values. Click on OK, and you realize that this is showing this way. So you can take your formatting to another step, remove all these colors here. We're not doing that right now. I want to focus on creating our visuals first. You can also choose to add a bit color here for conditional formatting for new customers so that we know when we got more new customers. We don't want to format empty values. And this is what the visual looks like. So we've been able to look at cohort performance. So what we can do next is just calculate the retention rate. This is the number of customers that we were able to retain. At the top here, this is your end month since first transaction. So you will need to add that title. But let's run over. So after duplicating this, I'll call this retention rate. Save. So what we can do next is to just go to measures and create a measure for retention rate. To create a measure for retention rates, retention rate. retention rate. So we name this, we use the divide. So we're going to divide the number of customers that were retained right here, divided by the total number of customers in that cohort. So we do cohort performance divided by new customers, close the bracket, click on OK. So that's super simple. You'll notice how there's a dependence between all the measures we've been creating, right? If something should go wrong somewhere, you know where to find it and fix that. So don't be tempted to always create new measures from scratch. If something should go wrong, you're going to be in a lot of trouble finding out where that happened. So we want to format this as percentages. And for this analysis, the decimals should be 0. So what we can do is just click on this visual, remove cohort performance, right? And just drop the retention rate. And now you see the retention rate, which is pretty simple and straightforward if you ask me. So what we have here is the retention rate, 28%, 13%, 14%. We can just see, we can click on this to format it. Let me see, where are you? Yeah. So click on retention, go to background color. The same thing we just did earlier. We don't format zeros, and now we have this simple retention graph. Simple, straightforward. See that it's actually very simple, and we have the result that we want to get. So what we can do next is to just put these two visuals together. Maybe we can use a field what's it called? A field parameter, so that we can switch between the two values, right? So what we can do is duplicate this page. I'm just going to call this page retention. That's all. Then I'm going to, let's format this now so that this looks good. So we come here, and personally, what I do most of the time is there are some presets here that you can actually use. You look at the minimal, you look at the, what's the other one? There's a bold header and stuff like that. So if this works for you, you can work with them. But most times, I just try to use something very simple. It doesn't have to be fancy for it to be effective. So what I do is remove everything so that it's none. Then I increase the padding. Padding is the space, right? So I increase the padding to 5. Sometimes maybe too much, sometimes maybe just enough. So you can just do, let's do 4, let's do 3. Okay, say 3 seems okay. So I'm going to ungroup these visuals for now so that I can edit them independent of each other. Then let me see. Yeah, so this is fine. I'm going to adjust it just a bit, and we have this right here. So this is what it looks like right now, and it's very readable, right? So what I can do next is to just copy the format from this visual when I just formatted, and is that formatting right here, and this is going to work fine. Then adjust this a bit. Okay, then if we don't want to run into, let me see, why is it not tallying? Oh, I see that, I see why. So I'll adjust this and expand this on full. This is where you may start considering to increase the page size, right? Yeah. So this is what our visual looks like. I can just adjust just a bit, and yeah. So this is what our graphs looks like. We can go back and add the what's it called? The conditional formatting for the new customers. 0 U and okay. Now we get to see, let me, if you feel the space is too much, you can always adjust it. Yeah, then adjust this right here. So this looks fine, this looks good, and this looks okay. We've been able to answer one of the major problems. Now we have our retention rate. There's another way we can also present this. So instead of having these two on different pages, we can just use a simple field matrix. Did I say field matrix? Field parameters, new parameter. We call this field. So we just drop, where are you? Cohort performance, and what else? Retention rate. Let me just switch the position. Then we call this metrics. You can call it retention metrics. And we add it as a slicer to the page. Add it as a slicer to the page, and we can rename this actually. So let me expand, let me increase the size of this page a bit. I think I should have kept the earlier size I created. Custom, I want to increase the width to, should I say 1.5? Yeah, 1.5 seems fine. Then I should make sure that these two visuals are grouped. You can now drag them peacefully. And oh, there's something else I didn't mention earlier. You also want to remove the interaction between these two visuals since you have grouped them together, and you want to give the illusion that this is a single graph. So what you can do to stop this visual from filtering this visual, what you can do here is to click on the first visual, go to, I believe, format, then go to edit interactions. So you want to remove the interaction between this visual and this visual right here. I saw it just now. Let me do it one more time. It's not coming up. So let me ungroup. Let me ungroup the visuals. Then let's do this now. Format, edit interactions. Oh, that maintain layer order. So let me adjust this a bit, drag it out. Yeah. So let's do it now. It should work fine. Format, edit interaction. So you say no, you don't want this. So when I click on this visual now, you realize that it's no longer filtering this visual right here. And when I click on this, you see it's still filtering the second visual. So you also want to put it as none. So if we select any field in these two visuals now, the values, they will not filter each what's the word? They will not filter each other, right? They will not be interacting with each other like they were doing before. So that solves that problem. And now we can just go back to dropping this visual over this visual right here and grouping the two visuals one more time. So that's fine. But what we want to do is that instead of having multiple pages for the cohort performance and for the retention rate, we want to have a single visual that solves that problem for us. So what we can do is for this, we just created a field parameter called metrics, right? So you can use a cohort performance, retention rate. You can name this whatever you want to name it, whatever works for your business. So what we're going to do here is to, what's the word for it? Change this to single select. Go to format and settings, then single select. Now a single value is selected, and just to I want check this, and this is fine. So to continue, we have to remove this measure from here. We have to remove this measure that we just created, retention rate, and now we'll be dropping this new measure called values, called retention metrics, right? Rather, not values, retention metrics. Now you see that it is showing what? It's showing you the retention rate. If I should click on cohort performance, it will show me the cohort performance. Now imagine if we calculate number of lost customers, that is number of customers that have churned, and the number of what's the other word? The churn rate, right? You also we add it to this list, and it's going to work fine, right? It's not going to give us any issues. So that's one way to go about. Instead of creating multiple pages of report, you can use your field metrics to do this and add it here. So the only thing that has changed so far is the color. And if you notice that because we're not using a field parameter, we don't have the option to do conditional formatting from this particular perspective. So one way to do that is to go to format, then go to cell element and click on turn on format. Then you need to go and modify the formatting so that it works the way you want it to work. There may be other ways to do this, but this is how I did mine. And I've not had a situation. Then you have to select the second measure, which is unfortunate. I believe there should be faster and a more efficient way to do this. Maybe you create a measure. You've selected this, something like that. Then go back to cell element and apply conditional formatting. Then done format, click on OK. And now we see our graph. So we can now switch between cohort performance and retention rate without any issues. So this is how to calculate your retention, your measures, and all that. And just to make this a lot easier to read, I'm going to align all the cohorts to the right. We go to row headers, and then we align it to the right. This way, all the years 2009 to 10 down to 2011. So that solves that problem for us. The only thing I believe that is missing right now from this visual, let me see, put this here, is what's it called? This number of months, right? You may want to give it like a header. You can give it like a little header, like number of months since first transaction, so that people should know that this is what this number is referring to. So we've used most of our space, so I'm just going to add a little height. I'm going to add a little height. This is, let me see, 1000 should be fine. 1000 is a lot. So let's do 900. 900 seems fair. So I'm going to drag this a bit and drag our measures down a bit. And now I can insert a little header. So I'll call it month since first transaction. Month since first transaction. Increase the font size to probably 28. Is that too much? Oh, that's too much. Let's do 20 and bring it up here. I think 20 is still too much. Yeah. Then drag this and align this to the middle. Once since first transaction is too big. So I'm trying not to focus too much on the aesthetics, but just focus on the result. Then this page should have a title, all the normal data visualization stuff. So we can now click on this visual, click on this group. If I click and you have the option to merge, just merge the two, and the two graphs are now one. So if I should move this, yeah, that's a single visual now. So that's all for retention and retention rate. But there's one more thing. I said that was one, and I see there's one more thing. Okay, there's one more thing. So what we want to it's just something simple, just like a retention also like a retention line. I think it would be great if I expand the page, but let me just do it on a different page right here. So I'll take out this as well, then go back here. Remember where, but this time around, I'm going to be adding a trend line, but the trend line is not going to be over date or something. It's going to be over the number of months since first transaction. So if we should go back to retention rate, this is it right here. Click on that, it's going to show up here. Then we go to fact sales. Remember, we have months since first transaction. We're going to add it as our x-axis. Do you see that here? Now you get to see the retention rate as first month retention rate is always going to be 100, right? So that's fine. Then you see a sharp decline where the value jumps from 100 by 1 month later, only 23% of customers. 1 month later, only 23% of customers are using our service. You see that, and then it starts declining gradually from there. And it makes sense since most people will be coming to your website, for example, your shop to buy something just once, and they won't be coming back again, right? So, but if you run a subscription model kind of business, this is likely going to look different, or it's going to be the same. Companies usually have trial periods for their product, like maybe 7 days, 8 days, 1 month. So if you want to calculate your retention rate like we're doing here, so you want to account for that. Maybe take out the data that comes from that period. Maybe after the trial, the customer subscribe and stuff like that. Then after that, you can start looking at your retention rate. There's no one way to do this, right? All the different models of business and companies have the way they calculate their retention. So yeah, you should work with what works for you and get the result that you want. So this is just a basic idea on how to go about it. Up next, we're going to be looking at how to calculate the churn rates, right? So we're looking at number of customers that have churned, then we calculate the churn rate. Let's do that.